We have two great experts joining us today, Cynthia Stein and Rachel Greer. And I've become so close with both of them that I didn't even ask them for their bios. So I guess I have to go off the top of my head and hope that I don't mess it up. I'll start with Cynthia. Cynthia has been a seller for a number of years. I think her first book was about how she started selling on Amazon with $100. Her most recent book is a book on account suspension and ways to prevent suspension. Cynthia speaks at conferences all over the country because I have the pleasure of seeing her on the topic of account suspension. And she works with hundreds of Amazon sellers and helping them get their accounts unsuspended and protecting them from suspension. So thank you, Cynthia, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. That was an excellent job, Jeff.
Oh, thank you. Rachel Greer is a former Amazonian, which I guess is a new term that's been dubbed in the last year. And Rachel used to work with the product quality team at Amazon, and after leaving Amazon has moved on to develop her own consulting company around product quality. And I don't know that I know of anyone who understands Amazon product quality and testing any greater than Rachel does. And I think she's a wealth of knowledge, and we're very excited to have her join us today as well.
Thanks, Jeff. 2 for 2.
Thank you. I'd be remiss to not talk about Seller Labs before we get started, and thank you all for coming on today. Seller Labs is a software company out of Athens, Georgia, working with thousands of Amazon sellers. Our primary product, Feedback Genius, is an automated feedback tool, and our other product, Snagshout, is a social discovery tool for product reviews and product discovery. We have a new product, Scope, which will be out in beta by the end of this month, which is a product research tool. So we invite you to check out all Seller Labs tools, and we'll definitely discuss those on other webinars. So now we're going to get started. We're going to get into this. We're going to get into the weeds on this quickly. And my goal for the presentation is really to kind of start with around 3 or 4 set topics for Rachel and Cynthia to speak about, and then we're going to move into Q&A. Considering we had over, I think, 175 questions come in, I think we're going to have some great Q&A, and we do ask you to put questions into the question box. If your Q&A is related specifically to a particular case, we will not be able to talk about that. So we cannot necessarily talk about specific products, but it's easier for us to talk about categories or higher level type stuff on a webinar. And our speakers, Rachel and Cynthia, are both available to you to answer specific questions you may have by contacting them directly. So let's go ahead and get started. And Rachel, I think, is going to start talking about Amazon's new enforcement team.
Awesome. Yeah, so the new enforcement team at Amazon is actually a team that many of you may already be familiar with from many years of getting their notifications, and that's the Restricted Products team. So they have been enforcing on ASINs for many years, since 2011 when I launched that program. And the goal of the Restricted Products team is basically to make sure that Amazon is legally protected in what it is selling on the website, both as Amazon and what's allowing to be sold on the website from sellers. So one of the more egregious examples that we used to see were medical devices that were being sold, and they were things that could really only be used under the care of the supervision of a physician, and they were being sold to anybody on Amazon. That's obviously not okay. And so Amazon's very concerned about protecting customers and making sure that what's sold on the site is legal. What we have heard recently and seen a couple examples of is action taken on sellers who have egregious restricted products violations. So one client that I was working with, basically we ended up having to give up on him because the team is, obviously they have a much higher standard to bear since it's legally restricted products, and we ended up not being able to get him reinstated because of multiple prescription drugs that were being offered on the website. So one example of some of the ASIN level restrictions that are happening are things like liquor-filled chocolates. And I want to use this example to give you an idea of the kind of challenges that Amazon faces in trying to enforce legal restrictions. So this is an actual listing that's still on the website. There aren't very many of them left anymore because there was a cleanup effort that happened in Q4 last year to remove liquor-filled chocolates off the website. And to be clear, not all liquor-filled chocolates are illegal to sell. There's certain ones that have a higher liquid alcohol content, and if you ate the whole thing, you could probably get pretty sloshed. But in general, it's kind of hard to get hammered off of just liquor-filled chocolates. So for the most part, these are actually perfectly legal to sell. The problem is when you're trying to manage a catalog as large as Amazon's and make sure that everything is completely safe and completely compliant, sometimes you have to move a little bit in the more strict direction. So even though some items could be legally sold on Amazon, because it would be too hard and too time consuming to figure out which ones those were, what I'm guessing, and so I wasn't a part of this decision, I'm guessing based on my experience and what I've seen from sellers on the outside here, what I'm guessing is they just made a blanket decision to remove all liquor-filled chocolates because that's easier to find in the catalog than to find the ones that are actually restricted. So that's one example of the kind of challenges you may face when working with restricted products. It may be that your product is actually legal to sell, and that's perfectly fine anywhere else. But because of Amazon's unique catalog issues and the size of Amazon, the scope of what they're trying to do, they may choose as an Amazon policy not to allow your product to be sold, even though it's perfectly legal to sell in the United States. So if we can go to the next example, this is an item that a lot of sellers have been having difficulty with in the last couple months or so. So a lot of times these things come in waves for us, so we'll see a lot of issues from the same things happen at once because there's just a new focus and all of those ASINs get scrubbed through at the same time. So this item, technically speaking, retinol should only be made in 2% concentration or less for an over-the-counter product. Anything above 2% is considered prescription topical cream. So anything that's 2.5% is being taken down pretty systematically. There's not very many of these left up on the website either. The difficulty here is that if you just have it happen once, you have your product, it happens once, okay, fine, it gets taken down. The difficulty is if you keep trying to put it back up. This team is obviously charged with one of the more strict mandates at Amazon, which is legal protection. So they're going to be a lot less tolerant of mistakes here. So if your item gets taken down by them, certainly try to appeal, and that's not through seller performance. You have to appeal through seller support. Certainly try to appeal, but if they shut you down, then find something else, reformulate, do something else. A way that you can protect yourself on these actual legal restrictions, not just restricted function and claims. Function and claims are different. They're saying that this retinol cream would cure cancer or something. That's a function and substance claim. Those are the kind of things that you just shouldn't do anyway. For the actual formulation itself, to protect yourself there, the only way that I know of to make sure that you're completely protected is to hire appropriate legal counsel. So a legal counsel that actually knows the space. There are some pretty obscure laws that determine what's permitted in topical creams, in health and beauty products in general. There's other restricted products too, like certain states don't allow air guns, certain states do. There's a whole bunch of different requirements across the board, and obviously Amazon's got a very long list. The only way to really know is to work with legal counsel. Obviously that's too expensive if you are doing wholesale or some sort of other kind of broad ASIN-based approach, but if you're investing in a private label product and you're trying to launch something new and unique and you don't see very many other people selling this, if it's in health and beauty or if it's in one of the other categories that Amazon has called out in the restricted products page, it would probably be a good idea to get some sort of legal research done to make sure that it's not something that Amazon prohibits. It would be really not fun to spend all of this time and effort to develop a product that you then can't use and sell, or that you can start selling and then get warned for and have all of your inventory be seized by Amazon. The other area there, of course, is hazardous materials. Make sure that your product isn't hazmat before launching it. So to kind of summarize in this area, restricted products is a team that's been around for a while. They've been enforcing on ASINs for a while. We have seen them start enforcing on seller accounts as well, and they don't seem very responsive. So if you ever thought that seller performance or product quality was hard to deal with, this team is much, much harder to deal with. You can't email them directly. You have to go through seller support. There's no way to contact them directly. It all comes through seller support, and I think everyone knows that while seller support tries, there's just a lot of things that they don't know and can't help with. So it's kind of an exhausting process. If you're doing private label, do your research. If you're doing wholesale and broad-based sourcing, if you get a warning, just remove those kinds of items from your inventory and move on. Don't even try to fight it in terms of if you've got a wholesale approach. It's only worth fighting if you've got a private label product that you've invested a lot in.
Yeah, and I think, Rachel, one of the things that's really important to kind of point out is do your research at the beginning. I think ignorance is not an excuse to break the rules, right? And we hear from a lot of sellers, oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that. Well, understand what you can't, just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean that you can do it. So understand whether you can be doing it or not prior to spending the time and money. So thanks for covering that. Rach, Cynthia, was there anything you wanted to add into that really quickly?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to this is that because both of these examples, we're also very familiar with, and sometimes Amazon does change the rules. And when they do, they may not catch everybody all at once. And so a lot of times it frustrates my clients too because they're taken down, but somebody else is still selling liquor-filled chocolates or someone else is still selling the retinol cream. And I will tell you with the 2.5%, this particular issue, there was actually, Amazon was actually selling it for a while. So the rules changed. And, my client, I had a private label client, was stuck with one of their best-selling products they could no longer sell. Unfortunately, there is not much that can be done about that. If they're making a blanket policy decision, they're not going to make an exception for us.
Okay, thank you. So Rachel, I have had one or two people mention that your sound is not coming through super clear, so if you could just maybe move a little bit closer to your microphone. We're going to now get into the topic of gray market goods, and I think Rachel is going to talk a little bit about gray market goods and how they're being seen on Amazon today.
Okay, so does it sound better?
I'll have to wait until they ping us and let us know.
Sounds good to me.
So the first thing with gray market is there's a couple different definitions of gray market. There are perfectly legitimate gray market approaches and ones that Amazon engages in itself. If Amazon can't get a product directly from a manufacturer that it wants, then they'll look to distributors to see if they can find it that way. And that technically is gray market if you define it a certain way. So in that sense, Amazon is doing that. Another definition of gray market is buying at retail and then selling on Amazon, which is a big approach to selling on Amazon. One way to verify if your product is a legitimate product or not is on every sewn-in label for items that are imported into the U.S. or sold in the U.S., everyone is required to list an RN. An RN is a registration number, essentially, with the Federal Trade Commission. You can see here, you can actually query by RN type, RN number, company name, and other information about them. So you can see all companies that do a particular product line, or you can look up a specific RN number that you find on a sewn-in label hang tag. So if you guys, have 5 minutes after this webinar, you can always check out the RN number on your winter coat or something like that and be able to look this up. But what that does is if it's something that is a branded product, then you should be able to find the manufacturer using that RN number and see who actually made it. So in one case, we had a client who was accused of selling counterfeit name brand suits, and we were able to look at their RN number, and it matched back to a manufacturer who had contracts, and these were publicly noted on their website, and we were able to get verification from their customer service department that they had contracts to produce those name brand suits. So in that case, you can actually verify backwards on some of these products to make sure that even though you're buying them through other channels, you can still verify that they're legitimate product. So that's one way from a regulatory perspective to verify gray market goods. And I know, Cynthia, we had talked about other ways in terms of supply chain to improve approaches to gray market.
Great. Cynthia, you need to unmute yourself. I heard some background noise, so I muted you, and my computer won't let me unmute you. I don't know why. I think I cut her off. Did I cut you off? I think I might have disconnected Cynthia. It won't let me unmute her. So we're going to move on to the topic and then let her come back and speak to that. And Cynthia, if you need to dial back in, please do. Sorry about that. And I don't know why it's not letting me. Well, let me ask a question that kind of came through in the Q&A while I figure out how to get Cynthia back on. Give me 1 second. Technology is so great except when it doesn't work, right? Every time I want to do something, I just get a little spinny wheel. Corey, can you try to, oh, there we go. Cynthia, are you on? Have somebody try to help me back at the office.
While we're waiting for Cynthia to come back on, one other point here is if you're doing private label goods and you're doing your own importing of private label goods, you should have your own RN. So this is just a kind of registration for anyone who's doing importing. The goal here is, for the most part, if you're having like a 100% cotton t-shirt, there's no way to find out who made that cotton t-shirt just based on the cotton fibers themselves. It's just not possible to trace that back. But if you have an RN on there, then someone can find who imported it and ask them questions and so on. So the whole concept here is that if you introduce something into commerce in the US, then someone should be able to figure out how to contact you. So if you're doing private label, then you should have one of these. And obviously anyone else who has their own brand or their own label will get one of these themselves.
Great. I think Cynthia's back on. So Cynthia, if you have anything to speak about with gray market goods, feel free, and otherwise we'll move into product reviews.
Okay, so I have a lot of experience with the dark side of gray market goods because a lot of my clients come to me, they're suspended for inauthentic. And what inauthentic means, it doesn't mean that it's counterfeit necessarily. It means that it was, it's where the source, where it came from, that it's gray market and they're not sure if it's an authentic good or not. And so, you know, Rachel touched on one way to know if it's authentic, but another way to know is also to find out where your supplier got their supply. So when you're suspended and you have to prove that your goods are authentic, just showing them the invoice from your supplier may not be good enough unless that supplier is a known reseller of that product. So, you know, if you're buying cell phone accessories from Verizon, you can feel pretty good about that, right? But if you're buying them from someone else, who maybe got them originally from Verizon, who originally got them from the manufacturer, then you get a long chain. And so we have had to reconstruct the chain in some of our clients' cases to prove that they bought legitimate goods. And so that's a pain in the butt. And so I'm really, what I'm doing with my clients now is I'm encouraging them before they make a large purchase, well, any purchase, before they make a purchase of some goods, that they take the trouble to make sure that the company they're buying it from has the right to sell it. Another issue may be that they have the right to sell it, but they don't have the right to sell it to somebody who's selling online. So we see that with a lot in health and beauty with certain high-end like shampoos and things like that, that are only designed to be sold through salons and brick and mortar locations. And so they may be buying it from the supplier who supplies the salons. I have clients who've done this, and so the product is legit. You know, it's not fake. okay, but the source that they got it from is not allowed. And so usually the person who's making the complaint to Amazon about the inauthenticity of the goods is in fact the manufacturer of the goods, because they know they're not supposed to be sold on Amazon. And so that's where, I tell people, how much trouble do you want to buy for yourself? Because, basically you've violated a contract somewhere. Usually it's a contract they've signed, when they bought the goods, it said that they weren't going to sell them online. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on the gray market, is that Amazon is cracking down on the gray market because they're worried about counterfeit. They're worried about, legal repercussions. And they're also getting complaints from manufacturers. And so they have to act on them. And my clients who sell luxury goods are probably the worst offenders.
So basically, in short, if Amazon is approached by a manufacturer or product goods that some type of gray market product is out there, they're going to take that very seriously and they're going to address it. Rachel, I had a couple of questions come in before we move on to product reviews. One was how to create, Darius wanted to know how to create an RN, and do you use the UPC you assign to the product?
No, it's based on your actual imported good types, and the FTC doesn't care about your UPC. To be honest, neither does Amazon. It just needs to be the right number of characters. So creating it, you have to first know that your product is actually something that's regulated by the FTC. So one example is you can't just assume that all textiles are regulated by the FTC for labeling, because some items aren't, like belts and suspenders aren't regulated. So whatever you're bringing in needs to be something that's regulated, and then you put that in your application where you say, what are you going to be importing? And you could say like t-shirts, and then that would be part of your application.
And then if there isn't,
and you just go to ftc.gov.
ftc.gov? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If there is an RN number, where am I going to find that on the product?
On the sewn-in label. So it should be on the label along with where it says made in China or Bangladesh or wherever. And the care instructions and the fiber labeling, usually the RN number will be on there.
And then is that something,
usually
is that a
anywhere
number
from 4
I
to
want
6
to actually,
characters.
is that a number I actually want to have in my Amazon listing?
It's not necessary, but what you should have is a picture of your sewn-in label on your listing. And that's actually not to benefit Amazon or the FTC. That's actually to prevent your product from being hijacked.
Great. I'm sure we could do another whole webinar just on product hijacking, but let's move on to product reviews because I know we want to get to a lot of the Q&As. So Cynthia, why don't we talk about some hot topics related to product reviews?
Okay, so basically product reviews started coming up on our radar. Last year there was a lawsuit that Amazon filed and against a number of disreputable companies, and my only guess on this is that they got the customer list as part of the settlement, because all of a sudden a ton of sellers were just suspended, and they had all been using these services, and they had to provide all the people who had written reviews from those services, and then Amazon took down all of their reviews and they let them back on. So the good news is usually if you learn your lesson, Amazon will let you back on. But some of the issues that the Amazon really
hey, Cynthia, and
yeah.
Just for the people that may not be aware, the violation that was being occurred by the review sites that got sued by Amazon was that they were actually charging for reviews, and in many cases they were never even shipping a product to the customer in exchange for that review being written, all of which are a direct violation of Amazon's terms of service, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was egregious what those guys did. I mean, basically, they were taking the money from the seller, paying off the reviewers who would just sit down and write anything that came into their heads, and they had not even seen the product or held it in their hands or used it in any way. So that was particularly egregious.
I just want to make sure that we clarify there are legitimate ways to solicit reviews and to discount products and to ask for reviews from shoppers, but the sites that are out there and that are selling reviews, I think Fiverr was one of them, and I think the other one was actually a private site. Those are the ones that are a clear violation that sellers should be staying completely away from.
Yes, that's right. And so basically, you got to look at how the reviews are being generated. Amazon said some specific things when they updated their rules last August, I think it was. And one of the things that they said that you could do is give away products for free. But what they wanted you to do was to do it directly to the buyer. In other words, what they also didn't like was people who were manipulating their platform, who were, giving deep discount coupons, having people go buy the product on Amazon, and then, write a verified review, right? And when they bought it for, 10 cents or something. And so there were a lot of things. I guess there were a lot of things that what Amazon calls manipulation of the platform. And so one of the things that I would tell my sellers now, because we get them back on, but then they're like, well, what can I do, right? What's legit and okay for me to do? And and I tell them, anything that you look at it through the lens of, are you manipulating Amazon's platform to do this? Are you using some trick? Because that is probably a real warning sign that could be a problem. So like super URLs are a really good example of this, because what they do is they mimic organic search, but they aren't. So you're using a URL that tricks Amazon into thinking that a buyer has come to the site and organically done a search and found your product, but they didn't. They clicked a link that took them there, but that had the search terms embedded in it as if it were organic search. So that is a clear. Oh.
So Cynthia, we completely agree with you about super URLs, but a lot of sellers, and I had a couple of people ask in the Q&A, have said, okay, I'm no longer using a super URL, right? I've understood the update occurred. I'm no longer using a super URL. My service doesn't use a super URL. Can I ask my buyer to go to Amazon and search for my keyword, find my product, and buy it? Is it legal for me to ask my buyer to take certain steps when they buy the product? Is that a violation of Amazon's terms of service? And to be honest with you, from my opinion, I don't know the answer to that, because you're not, I guess, mechanically trying to change the algorithm, but you are, I guess, kind of trying to manipulate the algorithm by asking for a certain sequence of steps to be taken.
That's correct. So there's so much that Amazon has not clarified for us, right? And so that is one of those questions, perfectly good question, and we don't know the answer to it. Intuitively, I would say no, but I tend to be very conservative. So, I would say I would be very careful about that. One of the things they specified that you must do is you must make sure that when the person leaves the review that they state that they got the product for free. And so that was also one of the ways that the other services were being very egregious, because their reviews that were being put up there didn't mention that they had gotten them for free. Some of the other violations that I've seen, just so people can look out for these, is, I had a client who he'd have a legitimate buyer, somebody would come buy his product, and then he would go back to them, like a few weeks later, and send them free product, and then ask them to write a review. And that is a no-no, okay? And the reason why it violates Amazon policy is because, again, you're being very selective about your reviewers. What they don't seem to like, and this is just based on what I've seen, is they don't seem to like it when you choose your reviewers and you narrow them down. Like, I had another client who got in trouble, who had scraped the Amazon website and gotten a list of all their top 500 reviewers based on the number of reviews they'd written, and then they were approaching them to do reviews for their product. So Amazon got upset at that, and part of it was because they kept going to the same list over and over and over and over again. So they don't want that either. They don't want to see the same name on, all 20 of your products. And let's see. what they're really just trying to do is to avoid anything that disrupts a normal organic review. So it's okay to have free reviews, and they actually recommend that people give out product for free and not at a discount. So
and
think
Cynthia,
of it as like
to go on to that, the real area here is anything that deviates from Amazon's own Vine program. So some of you may not be aware that Amazon has its own review system called Amazon Vine, and whenever anything new is launched, vendors can sign up to be in the Vine program. When they launch something new, they can have it be part of Vine. Amazon's own private label always used Vine orders. So basically, 40 or 50 items would be given away to top reviewers who are a part of the Vine program. You have to be invited as a reviewer to be part of Amazon Vine.
Looks like we lost Rachel there.
yeah.
So the Amazon.
I can finish what she was saying though, because I know what
Okay,
she
yeah,
was
go
saying.
ahead.
I was going to mention that. So the Vine program is basically Amazon's program, and it is completely compliant because it's their program, right? And so it costs money. Last I heard it was like $2,500. So it's not cheap. But anyway, that's the program that they have, and so right, like she was saying, anything that's sort of different from the Vine program is going to be looked at suspiciously, and so, it's definitely, but again, the ones that I've seen suspended are people who have really been pretty egregious about it. And
I think Cynthia, I think sellers are looking for this very cut and dry, left and right, black and white, heads or tails answer to this question, right? So Sam Cohen, which I could get into some great debates with conversations we've had in other forums asked, and I think this is the question that a lot of sellers are asking is, if Amazon has all these reviewers, they identify all these reviewers, why am I not allowed to contact them? And I believe, and I'll let you kind of speak to this too, and I don't want this to just get on to an Amazon review. We could have a whole webinar on that. We as a company believe you are allowed to solicit reviews. I think what Cynthia was saying was, if one person is constantly reviewing products, right, and all they're doing is reviewing products, the value of that review begins to decline. And if you look at Amazon's algorithm and you look at Amazon's search and how it works, the conversion is actually more important than the review. The conversion is signaling to Amazon that people want to buy your products. The review becomes the social proof. And so what Amazon is trying to protect is the social proof of their network. And so if they believe that the quality of the review, the quality of the reviewers, or the quality of the review program is in question, then people are going to stop using reviews as a way of determining what products to buy. So here's what happens. If your product is using a service to solicit reviews, or you're soliciting a list that you have to solicit reviews, and you get all 5-star reviews, and then you start selling your product through organic sales on Amazon, and your reviews start coming in as 1 or 2 star, Amazon is going to see that all of your 5-star reviews were at a discounted product, and now your 1 and your 2-star reviews are actually at a sale, and it's going to be a signal to them that you really have a crappy product. And so if you're starting out with sales, you're starting out with reviews because you need reviews as part of your product to generate social proof, and then you're moving forward and your organic sales are also coming through with 4 and 5-star reviews, then you're going to be signaling to Amazon that you have a good quality product. And so what Amazon doesn't want is you manipulating the system, and they're very vague in those terms. And so we don't know if manipulation is 10 items, 20 items, 50 items, 100 items. But Amazon is vague on purpose, because if they look at what you're doing either through a machine or through a human, and they determine that they don't like it, they're most likely going to remove your reviews first, and then possibly, if they see that you're doing it completely egregiously, potentially suspend your account. We have been running a review site for over a year. I've never seen a seller get their account suspended over using our site, but we have seen reviews get removed.
Right. So they're keeping a sharp eye on it. And yeah, and by the way, none of our clients have been using your product either. So our clients who got suspended were using other services, or they were running their own in-house product review program, but they weren't doing it right. So like I said with the guy who would give free product to an existing customer to try to encourage them to go and leave a review on Amazon, and the reason that was wrong, even though they were a verified purchaser of that product, is because they were actually trying to, again, they were choosing a biased, customer, because now they got two products for the price of one, basically, and then there's just sort of this odd feeling of obligation that now that they're given a free product that they didn't know was coming, that they didn't ask for, and so they almost are like compelled, like they have to leave a review. And so Amazon never wants a buyer to feel like they have to leave a review. They want them to feel like, oh, I liked this product, so I want to leave a review, or I didn't like this product. So that's what what you want to do when you look at any program, whether it's your internal program that you're running or a service, is to make sure that it's mimicking the actual buyer experience as much as possible, and that you're not trying to be sneaky with the platform, or I look at it as a good review program should be used to jumpstart your sales. And then after that, hopefully you won't really need a lot, right? At that point, hopefully you're generating real reviews, real sales, and your product has been jump started, and that's what you needed to do. But I don't know, how long you necessarily need to have lots of free giveaways. And then the other thing that they're very vague on is excessive. They use the word excessive, like we don't want to see excessive reviews. And you're like, well, what's that? Is that 10, 100, 1,000? And, they won't tell you either because they don't really know. They're kind of looking at your reviews in proportion to what other people, other sellers in your category are getting. So if you're competing, if you have a product that's competing against, other supplement manufacturers or something, you're selling vitamin C, they're going to look at what your reviews are versus everybody who sells vitamin C. And again, if they see something that's just way out of whack, then it's excessive.
Great.
And
let's move on to account vulnerability, because I think we could stay on product reviews. We did a whole hour-long webinar just on the topic. We could probably do another one. It seems to always be a good topic, and I think there's some good quality information. If we could try to keep this short so we can get to some of the Q&A, I think it would be great for the hundreds of people who are on this webinar and are throwing mad questions at me that we're trying to get to.
Oh, am I taking account vulnerability? Okay.
Yeah, that's all you.
Okay. All right. So people want to know what are the the most common ways that you get suspended, and right now it's really about product quality. I do get clients who are suspended for performance, which is how you ship your product out to the buyer. But most people are getting suspended either for policy violations or they're getting suspended for product quality. And product quality is fairly new. It popped up. They did a big change to the algorithm last year, and all of a sudden people started getting suspended for things that they had never had problems with before because they weren't being tracked and monitored by Amazon. And so that's where the used sold as new, not as described, just trying to throw out a few of these. That's where a lot of these terms that came out that people hadn't really seen before, and they were puzzled by them. And they're all about product quality. And it means that when the person opens their happy Amazon box, that what they receive inside is perfect. And it's brand new, perfect, etc. And I am talking about new products because I have not seen any product quality issues really with used. It's almost all been new. So it's really about new products. And they want the buyer experience to be a good one. And they were cracking down on people who might be sending in product that was less than perfect, which was talking about who's vulnerable. People who bought from liquidators were vulnerable, and from retail arbitrage, because sometimes the products would have some shelf wear, they would be less than perfect, and then they were being sent in, Especially liquidation, that stuff's been sitting around for a while, in different warehouses and stuff. Drop shippers, those guys are vulnerable because, again, they never see the product, they never touch the product, and so they don't have any control over what the buyer gets on the other end. There's also usually a lot of performance issues with drop shipping because, again, if your partner isn't just A+, then they might be delivering product late, get lost, and things like that, and you're responsible for all of it. Other people, I think almost every type of seller has its vulnerabilities to getting suspended. There's things that they're particularly, could be a problem. Definitely we've seen with, people, all the inauthentic claims, people who buy from wholesalers or, suppliers, if they're not confident that the product is authentic or where it came from, then that can be a problem. So, really what I tell people is make sure you're sending in perfect product, which seems obvious, but it's not. And it's also tough because if you look at people, for example, who buy wholesale and they're sending stuff in, you can't count on Amazon to weed out the bad product or the damaged product for you. They don't. And I've had stuff, I have a pack and prep service, and I send stuff to them, and sometimes almost half of what they receive has been damaged. And so they send it back, and, they go through the whole brouhaha of getting a replacement. But, people who ship stuff directly to Amazon, and then they expect Amazon to carefully unpack their goods and make sure that they only sell the good ones, it doesn't happen. I'm sure it does in the most egregious cases of, like there's pieces all over the floor. But a lot of times, damaged product just gets sent right on to the buyer. So, basically those are some of the account vulnerabilities. And this slide that's up there right now, this is Rachel's slide, and she can probably describe better what she's doing. But we do a similar thing for our clients as well on a weekly basis, where we help them see what's going on in their account that week that could be potentially a problem, so they can address it before Amazon does. And that's what I tell my clients is the best defense against, being suspended is to be aware ahead of time of your problems and to address them before they really become problems. So you're looking at baby problems, I guess, but, you're looking at things that maybe only have 2 or 3 what I call negative returns. But that's early enough that Amazon hasn't shut you down for it yet. And then you can address it and fix it, and your account stays clean. So all of these things that Rachel has on her slide are definitely things that we look at, and we have a few other things that we look at as well inside our clients' accounts. But I think one of the most important things you can look at every week is your returns and why people are returning their products. Because in Amazon's world, if it was a perfect world, nobody would return product. They would buy it and keep it. And so if they're returning it, if it's for any other reason than their personal preference, maybe it didn't fit, wrong color, wrong size, whatever, changed their mind, accidentally ordered too much, whatever. But if it's not the buyer's mistake, basically, if it's your mistake, then it's a problem. And that's what I call a negative return. So if they're complaining that it's defective, damaged, not as described, they thought they were going to get something else, all of those are your problem, and Amazon wants you to fix them. And so when you see them on your returns, you're supposed to be watching those and fixing those. And most sellers don't realize that.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Rachel. That was a ton of information. Just so you guys all know, our original conversation was let's talk about each of those points for about 10 minutes. But as you can tell, as you get into each of these topics, they draw themselves out because of all the complexities that Amazon has and that we as sellers have to deal with. So thank you guys for both coming on and addressing that.